Good evening. Shamelessly following Beijing's order on Arunachal, on COVID, on Galwan. Honestly, the only redeeming feature of this propaganda factory called Newsclick was that this trash was digital and that no trees were cut to print it, or quite honestly, I wouldn't even have wrapped my Ram laddus in it for fear of all that toxicity bleeding onto them. To paraphrase Kennedy, ask not how these journalists became frauds, ask how these frauds became journalists. The Newsclick and all such assorted Chinese and leftist funded media outlets are methane spewing landfills of lies, fraud, and selectivity, employing the dregs of the society, unemployables, urban Naxal and Bourbon Naxal academics, Nepo dynasty doormats, and ISI stooges. But if there is one thing one has learned over the years, it is that you cannot cure these propagandists. They are like the Rakt Beej. Their every drop of blood spawns more of the same. They survive only because geriatric jellyfishes hobbling around in Zimmer frames 1,000 miles away and also in China and dreaming of a rose-tinted revolutions throw some pennies in their piss pot. Question is this the only such mental asylum in India spewing venom? The answer is an emphatic no. There are dozens of such outlets. Has Modi banned them or thrown them all in jail? The answer is again no. In fact, Newsclick is a kindergarten crash compared to what a Chennai-based Gobi Manchurian dishes out every day. Please understand, from the fake church attack to Justice Loya to Rafale to selective lynchings to Ayodhya judgment to hijab, they have been exposed every time, but every single time they brazen it out in the garb of being virulently anti-Modi. They are anti-national, anti-progress, anti-human rights and anti-everything. Their stand on farm bills, CAA and 370 has proven this. And as far as revelations that their funding comes from China, you just have to analyze their coverage of two news stories that have heavily involved China in the last 3 years. Galwan and COVID. These dragon-loving chipkalis were so unbelievably pro-China and anti-India on both these stories that it beggars belief how they could think they'd pull it off. When every sensible person, including our armed forces, were telling the truth about China's criminality in Galwan, these Mao lovers were openly siding with China. Their so-called expert defense analysts were tight-lipped when China occupied 640 square kilometers of eastern Ladakh during the UPA, a fact reiterated by UPA's own foreign secretary. They were tight-lipped when China managed to make 600 incursions into the Indian side between 2010 and 2013, including in 2013 when the Chinese entered 28 kilometers deep into our territory at Depsang, including on June 17, 2013 when the Chinese transgressed deep into Chumar, an incursion the UPA did not disclose for 3 weeks for fear of public anger. They remained silent even as our trade deficit with China, that was $1.5 billion in 2004, climbed to $37 billion by 2014. Newsclick's analysts were then saying that Galwan, the same Galwan that Modi was being accused of losing to China, that same Galwan was under Chinese occupation before 2014 as, quote, since the 1962 war, China has extended its control over the entire Galwan River, unquote. They were reiterating the fact that the McMahon line and the LAC, unlike the LOC, remains undefined at most places and is categorized under differing perception. That even the status quo is disputed by both sides, and so these transgressions are historical. But in 2020, they flipped faster than a gymnast, and when the entire world was blaming China for the COVID catastrophe, these dunderheads were totally silent about how China's criminal law and lying about India's COVID deaths and vaccines. Trust me, all their Modi hate and irrational anti-India analysis works actually in Modi's favor, because irrational criticism of his policies allows him to shift the focus away from rational criticism of his policies. And these fools will never get this because they don't realize that you can run hate on journalism, but you can't run journalism on hate for too long.